95% of transactions in Sweden currently are non-cash. And yet, MPs in the Swedish Parliament have passed a law that says certain categories of retailer, including pharmacies, are not allowed to refuse to accept cash. The argument being that there are members of the population who are wedded to cash, don't, for whatever reasons, want to have bank accounts, don't want to use credit cards or smartphones, and that they should have the right to use paper currency. Discuss. There's also clearly a big challenge about the threat to the commercial banking sector as such. I mean, at an extreme, a full centrally bank issued retail digital currency potentially kills fractional reserve banking. Certainly hits, if you look in Europe, 50% of the profitability of European banks comes from payments in one form or another. Suddenly the central bank is getting into that business. Not only are you significantly increasing seigniorage, but you're potentially wiping out a large chunk of the commercial banking business. I think the biggest challenge of all, though, is going to be communications with the electorate, with citizens, with politicians, and with industry. And I have to say, traditionally, communications has not been the strong point of many central banks. Indeed, it was it Greenspan who said that if you can understand what I'm saying, I'm probably not explaining myself clearly enough. So, as I said, we could talk about this all week. I hope there's enough, at least for us to talk about for the next hour, and let me hand over and back to Adam. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. I mean, you started out saying that private, stable digital currencies, and of course Libra is potentially one of those as well, is unlikely to be significant usage. So why has it become such a big part of the debate and the conversation this year? Why do we need to pay so much attention to what Facebook is suggesting?
Because I think 12 months ago, retail digital currencies were the province of people like me and people with green biros in their shirt pockets. Libra has moved this very much into finance ministries and to the central banks at governor level, because there's a realization that you may be able to stop Libra, but if central banks do not do something in this area, somebody else will come along. That for a number of reasons, whether it's technology, whether it's changing consumer preference, whether it's the structure of the payment systems, there is a drive towards digital currency, and central banks can either be leading that drive or they can be playing catch-up.
Thank you, Phil. All right. So what I want to do now is move on to our central banking colleague who's on our panel. Oy is, as I mentioned previously, from the Bank of Thailand and has previously worked in the payments department, but currently Deputy Director of the Fintech department as well. So, I mean, from a central banking perspective, what might all of this excitement and conversation about Libra bring to what central banks are doing? Or is this, as Phil says, a complete distraction and you're carrying on with real central banking work and you're not getting carried away with all that stuff in the media?
Thank you, Adam. A very good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, ADB, for having me here. And it's my pleasure, especially in this panel, to be the only lady here on the panel as well after lunch. So about Libra, you can't really ignore it, because if you look at the composition of their association, it's a fully equipped ecosystem. They can actually exist in their own world. Some people call it the blue world because they're trying to create the new world with the new currency, with the new adoptions. So in terms of being the central bank or the regulator, we have done some of the proof of concepts of the central bank digital currency. We call the project Internon project to be compliance with other projects in the CBDC about the national parks. So in the Bank of Canada, they have Jasper. In Singapore, they have Ubin. And in Thailand, we call it Project Internon, which is the highest peak of the mountains in Thailand. So we have finished 2 phases. Now we are getting into the 3rd phase. And we are focusing on the wholesale central bank digital currency, which Philip mentioned about the retail part. And with all the challenges, probably because of those challenges, that's why we're not taking the retail version of it. So we want to explore the benefits of having the digital currency issued by the central bank, and also learning about the technologies itself. Even we are the central bank, but we need to you need to understand how the technology can help, and also encourage and gather and facilitate the commercial banks to come and learn together with us. Because within the project, we have actually collaborated with the other 8 commercial banks, including local and the foreign branches, to understand this. For the wholesale part, the first phase we did was about the basic functionalities, what the RTGS has. So basically, it's the interbank settlement, and clearing, and also some of the liquidity provision, which DLT can actually provide the real-time to increase the liquidity in the market. And we're actually talking about having the system to be operating 24/7, as opposed to the current window open version. And in my old days, in the payment systems, I was actually exploring about the concepts of CLS, the continuous linked settlement, to have the cross-border settlement among central banks, right? So you need just certain, like a few hours window that all those RTGs are open to have the PVP settlement, payment versus payment, to have the cross-currency settlement, at the same time to reduce the settlement risk. So once the DLT is in place, well, CLS might be disrupted in this way, but still in the proof of concepts, that's what I'm saying, right? Interbank settlement and also liquidity provision in the first part. The second phase we did was about the DVP part. So we integrated the securities life cycle between since the beginning, that the issue, trade, settlement, etc., to be with the currency leg. So you do the DVP, delivery versus payment, to have the real-time settlement between cash and the securities. And also we focused on the compliance part of sharing the information among banks. And the third phase that we are doing right now, we are collaborating with the Hong Kong HKMA, Hong Kong Monetary Authority, to do the linkage between the Internon and Lion Rock of the Hong Kong. So now we are in the implementation phase to build the central corridor for each of the platform to connect. And fortunately, we are using the same platform, which is a bit different from what Jasper in the Bank of Canada and Ubin by Singapore has connected via the hash graph, because they are using different platforms, but the functionalities are a bit different from what we're doing. So we're trying to explore the possibilities of having technologies to help. But one of my personal questions about the CBDC itself and the use case that we're doing, that actually RTGS that we already have is working perfectly fine, right? So I'm actually just asking my colleagues who are focusing on the use case, why did you pick this use case at the first place? If you want to explore DLT, you go for I don't know, anything blockchain can answer, trade finance or remittance or any provenance. But one of the answers that actually can enlighten me is about we need to start something that is quite controllable, because RTGS is within the central bank, responsibility, and we know in and out. We set out our regulations on that system. So if we want to do something significant, we need to start from something simple that you can take control of it, you can understand, you understand it well enough to actually leapfrog for to adopt new technologies. So that's why GGS has been picked as one of the use cases that the central bank started to explore, and the CBDC comes in place. But for us at the Bank of Thailand, we focused on the wholesale part. And on Thursday, we're going to have another panel talking about this. We have a colleague from the Cambodia Central Bank who share on the retail part as well. So stay tuned for that. I give back to to Adam.
Thank you. A good plug for your next panel as well. But what I wanted to ask, we saw Phil's slide about remittances and the trend in some selected countries in the region. Of course, we know the Philippines and Pacific Islands and some of the Central Asian countries, that's a very pressing issue. It is, of course, also important to the Thai economy, but generally, other trends in the Thai economy, is there a declining use of cash going on in Thailand?
Okay, a very good point. We're talking about cashless society, right? But probably we want to go for less cash first, And one of the most important thing that we think is to facilitate this is the infrastructure. And being the central bank, we encourage building and facilitating to have open and interoperable infrastructure, especially in domestic payment. In Thailand, we have a fast payment system called Prompt Pay. Is the new system that you can do the linkage of your bank account with your phone number. So basically you can have your friend transfer the money via your phone number for you instantly. And now the banks slashed out all the fee. So it's the zero-based fee that you can do the money transfer across the bank real time, instantly. And that's is one of the very important infrastructures that we have to be the foundation for other innovations, including the government services that they want to disburse money or collect money from the people to make sure that these are the real people that they want to, give the welfare to. So, and we can also get the tax return really fast via prompt pay. That's really important, right? So, if you register via your citizen ID, besides the mobile phone number, the government will know who you are and then transfer the tax return for you into your bank account directly. So that is really fast to disburse money and also collect money. Speaking about the remittances, we also can have the initiatives with other neighboring countries to have the collaboration with the central banks. And also there are initiatives among commercial banks to link the infrastructure together. When I'm talking about infrastructure, it includes the hard part, which is the system, and also the soft part, which it could be the standard. And currently, in Thailand, we have Thai QR code standard to play on top of prompt pay, fast payment. So basically, as Philip mentioned about, clicking or scanning the QR code to transfer money. And in Thailand, we use the standardized QR code that is interoperable among banks and non-banks. So they're using the same standard based on the EMV code, which is the international standard, and to have the QR code issued by any bank. So you can use mobile phone application, mobile banking application from your own bank to scan the QR code issued by any bank. So that's the fully interoperable and really transparent. Banks can collect data and know your behavior as well, and can offer you the right services. So that's really different from using cash, right? So speaking of remittance or the cross-border money transfer, QR code will be one of the important tools as well, because each country can have their own standard QR code based on the EMV code as well, and we can recognize each other's standard. It means that if I go to, if I come here and you are using the same similar, international standard, I can pay via scanning your QR code, and the money will get deducted from my bank account directly and will be transferred into the merchant's bank account. And that's really efficient to increase the efficiency and also reduce the transactional cost. Not talking about eliminating the intermediaries, because there are different models. You can stay with the correspondent bank model, the four-party model, whatever. But being a regulator or the authorities here, we encourage the having the open and interoperable standard, including the infrastructure as well. So.
I know we smirked about the tax issue, but of course that is a very important part for development of many countries in this part of the world, and tax collection, of course, could be a very beneficiary area for these new technologies as well. So I suppose I want to move on to the Asian Development Bank's perspective on the issue as well. Of course, we have Mr. Zuckerberg, has a great desire apparently to reach the unbanked and raise financial inclusion, which of course is very laudable, but may to some extent be unlikely, as Phil alluded to. But I wanted to move over to Ozir to see, why is the ADB interested in central bank digital currencies?
Hello, good afternoon. So I work for the technology department at ADB, and as such, we are also grappling with a lot of new emerging tech and what these new technologies mean in the context of ADB. We're experimenting a lot with artificial intelligence, with blockchain, with robotics, so on and so forth, and seeing across the board where and how we can leverage on some of these frontier technologies. In our case, if you see what's happening outside in the market, whether it's trade finance or remittances or even looking at sentiment analysis for credit monitoring upfront, we are experimenting in all those domains. And the program I run is the ADB Sandbox program, where we provide a safe place for us to experiment with our partners and explore these technologies. And in this particular case, when it comes to these currencies, we've been having this discussion, I would say, for the last 2 years or so. We're trying to understand what use case should we experiment with, where we can provide support, how we can bring this in where we can add value to what's happening. And two of the areas that keep coming up, one is sort of remittances for migrant worker use case keeps coming up. And the other one, for some reason, is tourism. We're creating a coin for tourism. That's another sort of area that is of interest. And then lately, even, and I'm talking from the technology side of the house, not really from the central banking regulation perspective, where we're being asked to explore things like, why can't the country have two currencies? Why things are happening where exploration can be done in a safe way to really see the impact as the boundaries are sort of being tested by new players. Even here at ADB, when you talk about cashless, we're trying to see how we can make this building cashless. We're actually in the middle of our own ADB wallet adventure here in terms of creating a sort of deposit-based facility for ADB international employees who go between multiple countries. So what that would mean for us in terms of our own global payroll processing. So a lot of opportunity are coming into play.
Sorry, so is that a stable coin based on a sort of basket of currencies, or how does the wallet work at the ADB?
We haven't thought through in terms of what are the exact approach we will use. Right now, we are working with a couple of partners to think through this, and this is one of the reasons why we like to get input in forums like this to explore more and get people's thoughts around this. But in general, the interest from ADB to support and experiment is there. If there is desire and interest, we get a lot of inquiries from different partners where we can support them. We're involved in digital IDs, we're involved in eKYC projects, we're involved in developing, especially when multiple countries are involved, to bring them into a safe environment for experimentation. So that's sort of the core area that we are looking to explore more. We have partnerships with pretty much most of the private sector industry folks, but also we partner a lot with startups nowadays, because for many of these things, it's the startups where you get more ambitious sort of planning and aggressiveness in terms of what they're willing to experiment with us. So we're exploring all this at the moment.
Very good, thank you. And we will, of course, the Sandbox initiative is something that ONFIF has been broadly part of from the Asian Development Bank annual meetings held in Fiji earlier this year, where we introduced the initiative, and we have got a few interested central banks in some areas that we're looking at. But feel free after the session, if you do have any interest in this area, we can of course connect you with the right people, and we're looking for a few areas where we can do some proof of concepts and some real work. As interesting as these panels are, we need to do some real work from time to time as well. So, I mean, just before I go on to Saket, Phil, I just wanted to go on to that point that Ozir made about potentially having two currencies in a country. Could a country have two currencies?
Well, there are countries that already do have two currencies, both in law. So you think of Bermuda, or Barbados, where there is a domestic currency, domestic dollar, and the US dollar operate as legal currencies. And then you have informal dual currency countries. Think, for example, Serbia, where if you want to buy a pack of chewing gum, you use the local currency, and if you want to buy anything else, you use the euro. So you can do it quite easily, and you could do that on a digital basis as well. The issue, of course, would be if you're using two fiat currencies and digitizing them, then of course both governments, both central banks have to agree on that. And if you decide to deploy a digital US dollar in your country, you may well hear from the Fed fairly quickly.
If you hear from Trump first or the Fed first?
Well, I leave it to you. And as for an ADB wallet, you don't need a blockchain for that. You can. The problem is going to be currency and currency conversion rates, and how do you build that in? But I mean, I think existing technology, simple electronic card-based technology, will allow you to do that.
Okay, and now just moving on, carrying on the sort of technology focus that Ozir had. Last but not least, I want to bring over to Saket, who of course is from IBM, who's been a very good partner of ONFIF in the research we're doing into this space. I know Saket has been working very closely with Phil on the latest version of this report, which is looking at the retail side. So it'd be very good to hear the thoughts on it. I mean, really, should we be looking at this from a technological perspective, or is it a policy question that we need to be dealing with first?
Sure, Adam, thanks. And thank you everyone for coming here. From an IBM perspective, let me put it, I was listening to conversation, very fascinating conversation, and hearing from you, Vijit Lekha, as well. Technology is already there to support digital currencies. And if issued by a central bank, the technology is already there. It's not a question of technology. It's more of a policy question. And let me clarify what I mean to say. Today, for example, in the US, I can buy Starbucks cards and put my money in it and go to UK and use the same Starbucks cards to buy coffee. And that's an example of a digital currency, a US dollar digital currency right there in my Starbucks card that I'm using it. Same thing happens in many other countries where we have, in India, for example, we have wallets, which has money that can be used anywhere else. And I will also stretch this to an extreme. Today, most of us here in this room might be getting our salary in our bank directly. It's an electronic form. We don't get cash as a salary. And that electronic form of money exists, and we use that electronic form of money to do our transaction. The difference between a central bank issued digital currency versus the currency and digital currency that we have today is that the issuance of that digital currency is backed by a central bank. So instead of printing paper cash, they will be issuing a digital fiat or digital currency, and has the same way of how it works, cash works today, same way it will work today. So from a technology perspective, everything that was spoken here on this panel, from the systems that have been put in place for real-time gross settlement and the conversions, the wallets, the mobile, the same technology infrastructure can be used for handling and dealing with digital currency. The key challenge here is basically that once you start dealing with a central bank issued currency, the integration of that in the basic fabric of payment infrastructure that exists in every country, that integration needs to be looked into. And the settlement engine, for example, that works in the very back end, that needs to be repurposed.